What is justice? A balance, a way to right a wrong, or is it something else entirely? Throughout human history, societies have wrestled with this question, and the answers they found were often written in blood and pain. We like to think of ourselves as civilized, as creatures of reason and compassion. But look back into the shadows of our past, and you will find a darkness there, a capacity for cruelty that is hard to comprehend. These were not just punishments. They were spectacles. They were warnings, etched into the public mind with instruments of terror. They were a brutal form of theater, designed to maintain order. These methods were meant to be more than just an end to a criminal's life. They were a message, a very loud, very clear message to anyone who dared to step out of line. The pain was the point. The suffering was the lesson. In a world without widespread literacy, without mass communication, the body of the condemned became a public text. Every scream, every broken bone was a word in a sentence of absolute power. The state, the king, the empire was showing its strength. It was demonstrating what would happen to those who challenged its authority. It was a raw and visceral form of control. In ancient Greece, a land we associate with philosophy, democracy, and art, a truly monstrous invention was born. It was called the Brazen Bull. Its creator, Pericles of Athens, presented it to Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas in Sicily. It was a hollow statue of a bull cast entirely in bronze. It had a door on its side, a door that led to a hollow belly. The purpose of this device was horrifyingly simple. A condemned person was locked inside. A fire was then lit beneath the bull. The metal would grow hotter and hotter, slowly roasting the person inside to death. But the true genius, the truly diabolical part of the Brazen Bull, was its acoustics. Pericles had designed a complex system of tubes and pipes that ran from the bull's interior to its mouth. As the victim inside began to scream in agony, their cries would travel through these tubes. The pipes would modulate the sound, transforming the screams of pure terror into what sounded like the bellowing of an enraged bull. From the heart of the ancient Persian Empire comes a punishment so vile, so drawn out, that it almost defies belief. It was known as Scaphism, or the boats. The method was a testament to a kind of patient biological cruelty. The victim was placed inside two hollowed-out logs or narrow boats which were then fitted together, leaving only the person's head, feet protruding. They were trapped, sealed in a wooden shell. This was not a quick death. This was the beginning of a long, disgusting, and agonizing ordeal that could stretch on for days, even weeks. They would force-feed the condemned person large quantities of milk and honey. The sweetness of the honey was an irresistible lure. Flies, wasps, vermin would swarm, maggots, worms, slowly eating the person's body from the inside out. In Imperial China, for nearly 1,000 years, there existed a form of execution that became a symbol of ultimate horror. It was called lingqi. The name is often translated as death by 1,000 cuts, the slow slicing, reserved for the most heinous crimes, such as treason, murdering one's parents. Lingqi was not merely an execution, it was a methodical public process of disassembly. The goal, inflict maximum pain and humiliation over the longest possible period, while keeping the victim alive and conscious. The process took place in a public square where a crowd watched. The condemned was tied to a wooden frame, exposed. The executioner, with a very sharp knife, would begin to remove portions of the body. The cuts were not random. There was a procedure. Start with the chest, then the arms, then the thighs, removing muscle and skin bit by bit. A gruesome art. A test of the executioner's skill in keeping the victim alive. Not literally 1,000 cuts, but many, dozens or even hundreds over hours. Sometimes opium was given to the victim, not to dull the pain, but to stop fainting and prolong the ordeal. The final act, a cut to the heart, or decapitation. Death did not end it. Dismembered limbs were placed in a basket, a final grotesque display. It wasn't just destroying the body, it was destroying the soul, condemning someone to eternal incompleteness. From the sagas of the Norsemen, the fierce Vikings who raided and explored northern Europe, comes a legend of a ritual execution so brutal it blurs the line between history and myth. It is called the Blood Eagle. This was not a punishment for a common thief. It was reserved for the most hated of enemies, a captured king, a treacherous jarl. It was a deeply symbolic act, a sacrifice to the god Odin, a terrifying demonstration of Viking wrath. The details, as described in the sagas, are, well, the stuff of nightmares. A gruesome work of anatomical horror performed on a living person. The ritual began with the victim being forced to lie face down. The executioner would use a sharp blade make a deep incision down the spine. Then, with an axe with a sword, they would hack through the ribs, breaking them away from the spinal column one by one. This was a task requiring immense strength and a kind of cold-blooded precision. The ribs were then pulled outwards, away from the body, creating a shape that resembled a pair of bloody broken wings. The pain at this stage would have been beyond all comprehension, a white-hot agony that would shatter the mind of any ordinary person. They would pull out the victim's lungs. The lungs, now exposed to the air, would be laid out over the splayed ribs. As the victim struggled for their final breaths, the lungs would flutter and inflate, supposedly resembling the gentle movement of an eagle's wings. It remains a chilling poem written in blood. During the dark days of the Spanish Inquisition and, in other parts of medieval Europe, a particularly cruel device was employed to extract confessions. It was known as the Judas Cradle or sometimes the Judas Chair. A pyramid-shaped seat made of wood, a pyramid-shaped seat made of metal mounted on a tripod. The victim was hoisted above it by ropes, suspended in the air, directly over the sharp, pointed tip of the pyramid. The torture began as the victim was slowly, mercilessly lowered. The point of the pyramid was positioned to press into the victim's anus, perineum, for female victims, the vagina. The person's own body weight became the instrument of their torture. The ropes could be used to lower or raise them, increasing the pressure or to jiggle them up and down, causing the point to tear and pierce the sensitive tissues. Life at sea in the age of sail was harsh and unforgiving. Discipline aboard a naval or pirate ship was absolute. One of the most feared punishments was keelhauling. It was a Dutch invention. The condemned sailor was tied to a rope. The rope was looped beneath the ship, running from one side under the keel up to the other side. The sailor was then thrown overboard. The crew on the opposite side would begin to haul on the rope, dragging the man down into the water under the immense hull of the ship. These protrusions acted like a giant cheese grater, tearing at his skin and flesh. He might survive the drag only to emerge a bloody, mangled wreck. It encapsulated the brutality of life at sea. In medieval and early modern Europe, one of the most gruesome public executions was the breaking wheel, also called the Catherine wheel. This punishment was reserved for the most serious crimes, murder, aggravated robbery. It wasn't just meant to kill, it was meant to utterly destroy the body slowly and methodically, in excruciating pain. The condemned were systematically broken, their bodies reduced to a shattered ruin, a public warning. The execution began at a public scaffold. The condemned were tied down, limbs stretched out, staked to the ground, or secured to a large wooden cross. The executioner, wielding a heavy iron bar, or sometimes the wooden wheel itself, would begin the breaking. The blows were not random, they were aimed with precision. The executioner struck the shins, the thighs, the forearms, the upper arms, shattering bones in multiple places. Limbs turned into a mass of broken bone and torn flesh, was braided into the spokes of a large cartwheel. The wheel was hoisted atop a tall pole. The victim was left exposed to the elements to die slowly from shock, dehydration, blood loss. As we look back at these horrifying practices, brazen bull breaking wheel, a question hangs in the air. Why? Why did our ancestors devise and carry out such profoundly cruel acts? The answer is complex. It lies in a world that was fundamentally different from our own. Absolute monarchs, rigid social hierarchies, power maintained by fear. In an age with no modern police or prison systems, the spectacle of punishment was the primary tool for social control. The pain was the message. Obey, or this will be you. These punishments reflected the beliefs and values of their societies. The blood eagle lynching, the Judas Cradle rituals embedded in cultural and spiritual life, they made terrible sense to those people. So what changed? The Enlightenment in the 18th century. Cesare Beccaria, on crimes and punishments. Punishment should be rational, proportionate, humane. Certainty of punishment, not severity, deters. The idea of basic human rights. Justice moved from the public square courtroom from spectacle of pain to a process of law. Today, most societies have formally abolished such cruel punishments. We have walled off this part of our past, confined it to history books and museums. And yet the echoes of this cruelty have not entirely faded. The capacity for it still lies within us. The story of these brutal punishments is a sobering reminder. It is a warning. Justice, mercy, and human rights are not guaranteed. They are precious, fragile ideas that must be constantly guarded, lest the darkness of our own history rises up to claim us once again.